The whole country waited anxiously for the report, wondering what the investigation would uncover. Collusion, obstruction, witness tampering, bribery. Any one of those conclusions could be cause for conviction or worse. But finally, on Thursday, the waiting was over. The truth was told, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Oh, you thought I was talking about the Mueller report? No. The findings of that commission were sadly not surprising. Nothing compared to what we uncovered on Maundy, Thursday, about what was done to Jesus. Collusion, without a doubt. Religious officials and political appointees who ordinarily would have had nothing to do with each other secretly conspired to have Jesus killed. Crucifixion makes for strange bedfellows. Obstruction? Certainly. Neither Pilate nor Caiaphas wanted to take the rap for what they were about to do, so they pointed fingers, buried evidence, and falsified reports. You do it. No, you do it. You do it. Witness tampering? Consistently. From the earliest days of Jesus' ministry until the moment they nailed him to the cross, witnesses were paid to lie about him. Bribery? Yes, and it didn't take much. Just 30 silver coins pressed into Judas's hand dropped the curtain on the whole Jesus show. Corruption in the halls of power is nothing new nor unique to our time. But this time, in Jesus' time, that corruption was leveled not at a political opponent or a religious rival, but at God. Both priests and politicians tried to stop God's work in the world, God's work in Jesus of forgiving sinners and loving enemies and bringing death under submission. And their efforts seemed, at first, to have worked. The Festival of the Resurrection is a liturgical field day, the center of our common life. Marvelous musicians and sneeze-inducing flowers and bright vestments already stained with a friend's foundation from a morning hug. It's also a boon for candy makers and restaurants serving Easter brunch. The Festival of the Resurrection is bright and happy. Christ is risen indeed. And I love all of that. The music, the fragrance, the joy, the dessert table. But it has nothing to do with what actually happened. It's not exactly fake news, but it's certainly not central. Let's take a look at the report. Unredacted and distressing. On the first day of the week at early dawn, women went to the tomb taking spices they had prepared. Why? Jesus was dead, and his body needed aromatic attention. But when they arrived at the tomb, the stone that had sealed it had been pushed off to the side. Hearts in their throats, the women snuck up on the gaping mouth of the cave in which Jesus' body had been so hastily stuffed. Remember, they are at their tomb in the early morning, stumbling through that darkness that is so dark right before the light comes over the horizon. At that hour, shapes are indistinct and edges are fuzzy. All cats are gray in that dark. The inside of the tomb was even darker than the sky behind them and humid, more humid than the dew under their feet. They would have had to strain to see inside. So they peered and they leaned a little closer. And then they saw it. The thing that defies the laws of physics and logic, the thing that changed the whole world forever, the thing that has bolstered both believer and skeptic, they saw it. They saw nothing. There was nothing there. No body, no burial linens, not even a ransom note. And suddenly, angels, elegant as RuPaul on the runway, appeared, confused. What are you doing here? He isn't here. He told you that he wouldn't be here. He has been raised. Remember? And then we receive the great Easter acclamation of faith. The women high-fived each other, jumping. Oh, wrong story. No, the women looked at each other. They remembered Jesus saying something about being raised, and they shrugged and went home. This is the fact of the resurrection according to Luke. The women remembered, the women returned. It does seem that they stopped by the disciples' home to report Jesus' absence, but as is so typical of women bearing important news, they were deemed hysterical, disoriented, unreliable. Though Peter did secretly sneak off to check it out for himself, but was similarly underwhelmed. So what is the conclusion of the resurrection report? We speak erroneously when we name the women witnesses to the resurrection. There were no witnesses to Jesus' resurrection. No one saw him escape the tomb. Instead, the women were witness to emptiness, darkness, a dank cave, and a scolding voice. Don't you remember? Yesterday marked the 20th anniversary of the shooting at Columbine High School. For days, we have been hearing from survivors of the attack, most of them only teenagers when gunfire erupted, and they have spent the last 2 decades trying to make sense of that senseless day. One survivor, whom I heard interviewed, reported having fled the area and her memories for 10 years, descending into depression and drug abuse and isolation, traumatized on a cellular level. But when the 10th anniversary approached, she and her sister decided it was time to return to the scene of the crime, to face together the site of the events that had ruined their lives. The woman described clinging to her sister, bracing for flashbacks. She said, "I was really scared. I thought I would be a wreck." But instead, when they arrived at the high school and peered into that dark, empty building, there was nothing there. No bodies, no blood, no evidence of a tragedy. It was a building. It was only a building that held a painful memory, but had nothing to do with her future. As they say in the investment business, past performance is no prediction of future results. It is true for survivors of trauma. It is the heart of the Easter story. The world had done its worst to both Jesus and those who loved him. Though no shots were fired, as at Columbine, blood flowed and friends betrayed and witnesses hid and some simply ran away. And the horrible events of Jesus' last days completely traumatized his followers. They thought their lives were over. Dreams shattered, hopes dashed, future closed. But when the women peered inside those dark fears, when they studied the empty pit they carried around in their stomachs, they discovered that there was nothing there, and certainly nothing to fear. Life lay not in a traumatic, dark past, but in an unexpected and sunlit future, a future in which life was possible, a future into which light shone, a future into which Jesus had already marched. Peering into the dark past or into that dark cave of our fear is as futile as the dog who hopefully sniffs the spot on the kitchen floor where 2 years ago you spilled a little turkey gravy, hoping maybe there's something there, but there's nothing there. Nothing but a memory. Death lies behind us. There is nothing there to see, but life lies before. If we only have the courage to remember not the trauma or the disappointment or the fear, but the words Jesus' words, I will suffer, I will die, and I will be raised. And the final reports from the angels, he is not here, he has been raised. My friends, that tomb is empty. The silence has been broken. Death and grief and sorrow and fear have no power over us. But life, the resurrected life, it lies before us, and Jesus is already there.